factors that I should consider when determining how to set my project rates? We have a tendency to underbill. And we're just like, no, I want to help. I think this is going to be great. Does it even make sense for you to ask for backend profits? Because maybe it just makes more sense to me. Welcome back. I'm Top Music Attorney. So as a real lawyer, a very common list of questions, and there's 3 that I am asked by music producers that I represent. 1, what are the factors that I should consider when determining how to set my project rates? Number 2, what type of deals should I consider doing? And then number 3, can you give me some example rates? I work with a lot of producers, and then just as far as like my background, I'm an independent artist, but I've been lawyering the last 10 years. Okay. So I've been doing this since I was 4. And in order to kind of make my way in the music business, I taught myself how to do music production. So for a time, I was doing some freelance producing. I produced my own music. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to cover all that in today's video. And then after the video, if you still need help, you can head on over to topmusicattorney.com for contracts, music business courses, and you can even be directed to hire an attorney if you need an attorney. If you're excited, make sure you subscribe right now. Let's go. Let's go. All right. So, number 1, factors on how to determine your project rates. Factors that you need to take into consideration include time. Everything takes longer than you expect. This is kind of like my general rule for life as I continue on. But understanding the time commitment for a project, I think that a lot of people will fail to set a base rate to avoid undercharging. So what I mean by that is that typically your time's going to go over. So one of the beautiful things that you can do for customers is to set a flat rate and you go, look, this is what I'm going to charge per song. Let's say I'm not going to go over. Most of the time you go over for many of the reasons we're going to talk about. But if you have like a baseline for the project that you won't go under, that's really good. Okay. You just want to make sure to protect your investment of time. But then also, here's the other piece. As you continue to get better and better in your skill of being a music producer, you get faster. Does it mean that if you are billing hourly, you should therefore be paid less? Well, that's up to you, right? That's how you decide to actually, do your billing. But typically, what I would recommend is that if you just work faster so you can get the thing done faster, you would still want to charge, right? And the same amount of time that it would have taken someone else, maybe who was more inexperienced than you. So account for the actual time. All right. Make sure you cover that. The other big piece is going to be the gear and the resources. So you have to think about what does it take to do this, right? As bedroom producers, for example, you may not be set up to bring in and have live drums, for example, or to have an entire band in the studio. And so you may need to, in certain circumstances, go to other studios. You might need to hire out because obviously we can virtually hire drummers. We have done this in my projects. It's actually really cool how you can, have a virtual session with someone because they are set up. They can send you the stems. So you have to kind of account for that for your time, but also part of the budget. And you need to articulate to your customer, to your client, that maybe additional access to performers, vocalists, whatever it might be, will be additional charges. All right. But this is going to be a factor in what do you currently have? Do you have all the things that is needed to actually make this happen? And then, also let's make sure you're getting paid for your creativity because there's a huge range. There are, beat makers, there are music producers, and in between all of that is a different degree of creativity. And so for me, as an artist, as a singer, as a creator, if I'm working with a music producer, that music producer might take what I did because I already produced everything and I'm going to give the stems and I just go make this better. And so the level of creativity is a lot less than me being like, hey, I need help writing a song from scratch and we're going to co-write. And so that needs to go into your factoring of the value that you are conferring in the project. You also want to make sure that you're getting paid for your general knowledge. Okay, so this goes again into kind of where you're at, your years of practice and expertise, and then also how you can guide one of your clients, right? Because there are other things that go into this. When I've worked with music producers, I go, whatever we can do to have you give additional value, but also ascend your customer into something new. Because a lot of you music producers out there are working on your personal branding. You have learned music marketing. You have learned how to do social media content, right? In order to promote what you do as a music producer. So this is all additional knowledge on top of your knowledge piece of being a great music producer that you can share and get paid for. Now, the other piece here that a lot of people do not account for until usually a little bit later in their career, and I find this just because, we're all just very passionate about making music. And so as a producer, you might be like, look, I'm so grateful to get paid and I just have people pay me flat fees. It's the admin time, your administrative time to do file management, to export stems and different versions of the song for your artist, and then upload them to Dropbox and then type up a little email. I don't know about you guys, but emails can take a while. All this is extra time. And so typically it is not accounted into the package deal, right? But you need to kind of think about that buffer time of like, look, it is going to take me like 20 or 30 minutes through all these different steps and the file management. So I'm going to make sure that I kind of factor into that total amount that I'm going to charge for this. And we'll talk about, right, how to charge, right, how to break it down. But also you want to consider, your demand. Here's the thing. I want you guys always working on your music marketing, aka your marketing in general. Your ability to make more money can be heavily associated with the demand for you. And how does someone think that you are in high demand? They go to your Facebook page. Not even that, right? They go to Instagram, they go to TikTok. And if you have a decent following and you have engagement, all of a sudden, there is a closer alignment of you having something going on in your client's mind. You know what I'm saying? So if you, and then of course, quite frankly, if you are getting a lot of gigs and you have a lot of work, you are in fact in high demand. But perception makes a big difference here. If you are in high demand, again, this is a factor that plays into how much you can charge. All right. And then lastly, can you provide additional value? So I go back to what else can you throw in to this kind of bundle of what you can do, and just think outside the box, man. I'll tell you, as a lawyer, this has been like my golden ticket, so to speak, on just like the fact that I know about music and I've done this since I was like 4 years old, and I'm very familiar with music platforms and just logistical stuff. That is additional value to my clients, because now my clients are like, hey, I'm having this problem with BMI. And I'm like, oh, I know how to fix this. So it has nothing even to do with being a lawyer. It just so happens that I am just so in the mix and on the ground floor with what's going on in music and entertainment and all the things that I can bring those additional services. So for you guys as music producers, same thing. All the other little skills that you have to learn in order to promote yourself, to grow your own business, you can charge extra for, right? Potentially. All right, so that's number one, on consider all of these factors when deciding what to charge, because I gotta tell you, I think, this has been the case for myself as well as a lot of entrepreneurs, which is we have a tendency to underbill, right? And we're just like, no, I want to help. I think this is gonna be great. Like the price gouging usually is a lesser kind of thing. It's usually that everyone's just trying to be helpful. Okay. A Music Attorney is your number one legal resource for artists, producers, and record labels. Get contract templates, one-on-one legal advice, free master classes, and everything you need for your music business. Go to topmusicattorney.com. So now, how do we do the deals? Moving on. Category number 2, the type of deals where you are just being hired as a music producer with zero expectation to royalties, meaning ongoing earnings from the music. If you are just wanting to get paid for your time, that's it. You are a work for hire. And as a work for hire, this is something, for me as an artist, I love these deals because I go, look, your value, you've set it at this amount. Great. I need you to help me to bring this vision to life. So I'm going to pay you this amount of money. Your work for hire. That means I own the music. That means you have no right to any back-end points. If that's what we agree on, beautiful. Make sure that's always put into writing. Like for anything you do with any artist, please make sure everything is always in assigned writing. And look, as a music producer, you should have your own contract templates. You should be using them over and over and over. Don't wait for people to give you theirs because you don't know what their contract template says. You feel me? But anyway, so that's the straight for a fee kind of situation. Another one is going to be a payment upfront with back-end points. When I say points, I mean, again, percentages in the royalty. So you say, as a music producer, well, Krystle, what's industry standard? And it can be whatever you want it to be. What I have seen over and over and over is that maybe 1% to 3% is very common, especially with big labels, medium-sized labels. And then as we go smaller and smaller into more independent realm, then the percentages usually get bigger and bigger. Okay. So we might have, let's say a nice hybrid where Mr. Producer, you're getting paid a certain amount, but maybe it's a little bit less than what you otherwise would have charged. And if that's the case, then you ask for more on the back end and you go, I actually want 25%. I actually want 30%. Okay. It's a negotiation. People are so scared to just articulate what they want because they think that something bad's going to happen. Usually the worst case scenario is that someone's going to come back and just say no. I've learned that just, kind of lawyering on behalf of, individuals and just being the bad guy, it can make it easier. But if you have a deal where there's front end payment plus back end, You can come up with what percentage that is. Please make sure it's in writing because bad things happen when you do not put the stuff into writing. You are not protected. Problems come up, especially if something great happens with the song. Okay. And then in the third category, there's going to be an upfront payment, but you'll get only a percentage of net on the back end. So let me clarify. When we say gross earnings, we go, well, look, John and Jane are doing a deal and they're agreeing that 10% of back end royalties will be paid to John as the music producer of all income. So gross means of all income. There's no deduction, there's no paying anyone back for anything. It's just it's very simple math. But if we do it so it's net, this is more common with record label deals. Okay. So what it means is that again, John and Jane, there's money being earned, but if it's net, there are expenses that are going to be repaid, let's say to Jane, if Jane's the label. And so John only gets paid after Jane gets paid back. So this is why making sure we're really clear and have a contract is important because, maybe you're like, oh, we're going to do 10% and you never clarify. Is it 10% of what? 10% of gross? 10% of net? So the clarification piece really helps. All right. And then also there you can do deals where it's just back end points only. So, this is great for just like collaborators, right? So you have two really creative, wonderful people coming together. And you're like, look, we're not really like trying to exchange money here. We are just going to collaborate on a project and we're going to, let's say, just do 50-50. And that's it. Again, extremely important. You have it in writing, and this is for purposes of ownership and copyright protection. Because, guys, if you don't put stuff into writing, what happens is that your deal may not be legally enforceable. The Copyright Act requires that you put your agreement into a writing. Very, very important. So those are the different ways that we like to structure these deals, and you can do it one of any of these ways. Now, let's talk about, well, does it make sense for back-end points? Because some people just go to war over this, let me tell you. And they'll be like, he wants to only give me 5%. And it's just ridiculous because I gave all these discounts and I, did all this stuff. One of the things I talk with my clients about is just like, okay, well, if you want to go to war over this, I gotcha, no problem. But I go, do you expect this to make money? And you never know. That's the thing. You really do never know when something's going to, become popular. However, we can reasonably conclude whether someone is likely doing something with their music. Are they ever posting on social media? Is this like their only release in years? And so you as a music producer, you're going to gauge this kind of thing for what makes more sense for you. Because if it makes more sense just to get paid upfront so you can just pay your bills and do what you need to do, great. And maybe you don't take anything on the back end because here's the thing. Back end registration with the PROs and making sure everyone gets paid correctly and your song trust and your MLC and all this stuff. It's a lot of administrative work. And even if you're not doing it, you now need to go and chase around the artist, and then the artist might not even know what they're doing. So you have to kind of think about this on, does it even make sense for you to ask for back-end profits? Because maybe it just makes more sense to make the money upfront. My general feeling is that if I'm a music producer, I generally do want to take some back-end points as a fail-safe investment thing, all right? So it's just to have a little bit of security. So that if the song does go viral, if something does happen, that I at least get a little bit of a taste of that on the back end. Okay. So that's kind of my personal preference, but it really is a thing as far as all the, administrative steps and the additional headache that that's going to cause for you, because at some point, maybe the artist doesn't pay you and now you got to hire a lawyer. You call me up and you're like, Krystle, I've never been paid for this song. And now you need to go through that whole process. You know what I'm saying? So make sure you have the payment terms. Now, finally, to the last question, which is, let's talk about rates. What are common? So let me speak to not only what I have paid, right? But I also want to speak to the experience of just being a lawyer for a long time and just doing these deals. Okay. So I just know. And so for engineers, so meaning someone who is helping to actually record the session, do that kind of thing, the rate typically is going to be between maybe $50 up to, I've even seen as high as 500 an hour. And so just the engineer part, if you go somewhere, that's what you can expect. If you have a home studio, you can have one of your friends come and help you out. Okay. So you can also do it for free. And then on the kind of editing piece, so you have someone who can come in, let's say to comp vocals, to stretch vocals, to do all of that. Again, the range might be from like $50 up to $150. In that kind of instance, again, just billing for your actual time makes sense. Because if it takes you many more hours, right? If it takes you 2 hours, if it takes you 10 hours, there's a big difference there. So I am definitely a fan of just having you bill your actual time based on an hourly rate. The same thing for engineers, okay? But, it can be helpful to set minimums. Here's a little pro tip. It can be really helpful to set a minimum, let's say, of just 2 hours. And so that way, if the session goes for, let's say, an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes, you still have at least a bottom line for your investment of time, right? To travel somewhere, to get set up. You know how it goes. Like people are running late. And so all of a sudden, 2 hours ends up being actually 3 hours. All right. So then let's talk about mixing. What I've seen for kind of beginner mixers, the rates might be from $200 to $400. And I do see flat rates very commonly. And the thing that I've seen across the board is that with mixers, some will set a number of passes that you get. So, meaning you get to listen to your song, give me some notes, that's pass one. So, I will only do that, and the mixer will communicate. I will only give you like 2 or 3 passes for this certain rate. Okay. And then other mixers will say, hey, here's the rate, and you get as many revisions, and we'll call it that rather than the pass. As many revisions as you want. Basically, I'm going to work till we get it right. Now, for me as an artist, I can tell you that when I've paid premium, particularly when I've paid premium for mixing guys and gals, I don't like it when they go, you only get 2 passes. I go, well, what if you get it wrong, right? Because when I send a song to be mixed to someone, I give them the opportunity to listen to my mix, right? So my producers and I we will actually send a sample. We're like, hey, this is kind of what we did. This is how we want it balanced. And then sometimes the first pass is just wildly not even close to what we had asked for. So it takes more time. It takes my time to come back and give notes and that kind of thing. And so for me, that's a deal breaker right out the gate. I don't care what I'm paying the person. If they're telling me they're only going to do like 2 or 3 passes, I go, well, if it's not right, it's not right. So always, ask those questions because again, if this is just how someone does their business and they're like, this is only what I do, that's okay. So just be clear on that. So entry, kind of level, it would be 200 to 400, and also what I've seen for more like, and I'll say intermediate. Okay, I'll use that word. And these sometimes are guys who have like insane resumes. And I work with some of these guys, and they've worked with just some of the biggest stars on the planet, and they have an independent rate, right? So they have their record label rate for the big record labels, and then they have their independent rate. And usually it's somewhere between 500 and 1200. Again, flat rates. Usually I like the ones that are not going to set, caps on how many passes, that kind of thing. And then when we get now into major label territory, the mixers will be charging anywhere from 2 grand up to 10 grand and sometimes even more. So those are for my mixers. For those of you watching right now, drop a comment on what you think with those rates. If you do this for a living, how much do you charge? I'm very curious. Let's get into actual production. Now, this is going to be different. This is not just like licensing a beat, right? An instrumental. We can do that through lots of platforms. We have producers who will do that directly. And so they will set their rates accordingly. They might license it for a period of time. They might sell you the beat. And so that's just all over the place. I promise I've seen like everything from a few $100s on a licensing fee up to someone wanting to buy out an instrumental for 10 grand, 15 grand. So it really is just going to be based on those factors that we talked about on how you can reasonably set your rates. But what I want to talk about specifically is production. I'm trying to stay closer to kind of what I see commonly because there are people in, kind of the rare instances where it might be like $100,000 for an instrumental, it might be $100,000 for a sample, like, you know what I'm saying? So in the realm of production, for a beginner, I would say don't charge anything less than $500. Just don't. I was guiding someone through this and I'm like, look, if you're going to do a song for someone, whether they're bringing something to you that is somewhat finished, right? It's written, they have some ideas and all this stuff, or even if you're doing something from scratch, it's going to take you more time than you expect. Now, for you to kind of go on the low end of charging, totally fine if you are newer to the game. Let me tell you, you've got to get your reps in. 100%. You build up your catalog, you build up word of mouth, you do amazing service, you make people like just raving fans of you, and then they tell their friends. And then those friends come and hire you. You see what I'm saying? That becomes a snowball. And so start with, kind of a minimum. And then now once you kind of get into that intermediate area, what I start seeing is more like 600 to 1800 per song. Okay. And again, you have to think about your hours because if you are going to set a flat rate per song, you have to understand that one song might be 20 hours, another song might be 100 hours. So you have to think through that. Okay. But equally, it can backfire for, someone who is billing hourly. And so that can become challenging for clients. And so if you want to have clients kind of hire and rehire you, just thinking through what makes sense. All right. And then in the professional kind of, setting easily, I'm having producers who are charging 2,000 up to 5,000. Again, these are independent rates. I have seen just outrageous, I think it's outrageous numbers, even in the independent realm, going up to like 50,000. I think those are more major label rates, and obviously those are big numbers, 100,000, for a song. So I want to give you guys that as a framework because I think some of you are undercharging, okay? Or you're just not even setting rates and you are not putting yourself out there, right? To market yourself, to make it known that people can in fact hire you, and that's really important. So let me give you the highlights here, right? So you need to make sure that you are finding good fits, right? And if you are going to be doing this, figuring out what makes sense for you. If you want to do a work for hire, that's great. Do the work for hire. If you want to make sure that you have a little bit of a back end with a percentage, I would say do that. And having something very, very minimal is really hard to argue with, right? If you go, I just want like 1 to 3%. Are you kidding me? If you come in and you're like, I want 10%. All right, now we're kind of raising an eyebrow, right? If we're the artist, but it goes, what do you have to kind of back up what you're saying? I want to give you the excuse that I told you that it's okay for you to say exactly what you want. And then you actually want to shoot a little bit higher than what you actually want. Because typically there's always going to be negotiation. This is how it works. At some point, you quite literally are going to have enough business. And so you just tell people and you go, these are my rates. And if they don't want to pay them, they don't pay them. But in the beginning, it's really important for that negotiation to just be like, look, I want a little bit more. And then they come back, they're like, well, let's do this. And then you end up meeting somewhere in the middle, which is actually what you wanted in the first place. So it's a really good negotiating tactic. All right, please make sure there are contracts every single time you do this because you will just run into problems and people will just be like, look, for example, I'm not paying you the remainder, right? You want to get a minimum of 50% down first. Don't do all the work and not have anything paid. If you can get all of it upfront, that's amazing. But a lot of people want to do 50% down, 50% on the back end, and that's perfectly fine. Okay. And you will adjust your rates. You will increase your rates as your street cred goes up, your social media presence goes up, and your resume goes up. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Make sure to give it a big thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next one. I'm Top Music Attorney.